Oh my goodness, that's so intense, I will give you more intensity, clap, clap, clap. While the demanding female voice definitely belonged to my wife, I did not know who the loud male voice was, but he was surely challenging my wife. I was standing outside my bedroom, stunned by what I heard. The door was half open, so I could hear their clear voices. I didn't dare to look inside, as I didn't want to confront them face to face. Instead of barging in and causing chaos, I took a moment to calm myself down. It was difficult, even more difficult than most things in life. But I had experienced enough in life to be able to calm myself and think rationally. I went to the garage at the back of the house and retrieved the one thing I despised the most. Slowly, I made my way back to the bedroom door. There was no point in rushing. They weren't expecting me to come home until evening, and it was still only noon. By the time I reached the bedroom door, things had quieted down and they were talking. "I've had many partners, but you're the best, babe," exclaimed a loud male voice. "You're not too bad yourself," complimented my wife with a hint of a smile in her voice. "But it would be better if you get dressed and leave now," the male voice laughed. "Are you kicking me out now that you've had your fun with me? Why take the risk when we can keep this good thing going?" "Isn't your husband supposed to come home in the evening?" asked the male voice. "Besides, even if he does come in now, I can handle your small-statured husband anytime, okay?" That was a challenge. I didn't want to hear what my wife had to say, so I pushed open the door and entered, standing in the doorway without moving any further. To their credit, they both jumped in surprise. My wife, who until that moment was lying, quickly covered herself. I would have found it absurdly comical if it weren't for the guy lying next to her. I didn't recognize him, but I immediately understood why he was so confident about challenging me. While I had an average height of 5.9 feet with a decent build, he was at least 6 feet tall and had bulging muscles, almost like a bouncer. I could see why my wife was attracted to him, and he was much more well-endowed. Of all the things I expected my wife to say, she asked, "You're home. Why are you home so early?" I didn't reply. I just stood there in silence. She looked nervous, though not scared. She was probably trying to figure out how to handle this situation in her mind. The well-endowed guy didn't bother to cover up. He just sat there, sizing me up and smirking slightly. "When did you come in?" my wife asked, trying to gauge how much I had seen. It was funny, really. She was in bed with another man. Wasn't that enough for her to realize what had happened? Once again, I stayed silent. Then something even funnier happened. "Listen. This is not what it looks like," she stammered. Again, no response from me. The well-endowed guy took over. "You're a man of few words, aren't you?" Still no reply. Just a cool and curious gaze. "Well, that's good, because if you start talking and make me angry, it won't end well for you." I couldn't help it. I smirked. That got him riled up. He stood up from the bed. "What are you smirking at, you coward?" I chose not to reply, but my look said it all. "I'm smirking at you, idiot." He immediately understood, and with an angry look, started walking towards me. He was about to be within arm's reach when I revealed my right hand, which I had been hiding behind my back the whole time. His face was only inches away from the gun I held in my hand when I fired a shot. My wife screamed louder than I had ever heard her before as debris flew from the place above her head, where the bullet had hit. I wasn't foolish. I didn't aim for the well-endowed guy, but firing the gun so close to his face had the desired effect. He fell back, covering his ears and screaming. I waited for the screaming to stop and then spoke for the first time since barging in. "I came home because I had forgotten a document. I had enough time to spare. And as for this not looking like what it is," I glanced from my wife's face to the gun and back to her face again. I noticed the unusual calmness in my voice, as did my wife. She was shaken, and I found satisfaction in that. I then addressed the well-endowed guy who was recovering from the shock. "I'm not usually the silent type, but with you, I really don't have anything worth saying. And as for facing me, well, that depends on whether you want to stay alive." He didn't respond, just kept looking at me and then at the gun, still a bit disoriented. "You're not going to kill us, are you?" my wife asked, trying to appear braver than she actually felt. "You can't. You're not a killer," I smirked. "Well, I also thought you were a faithful wife. But it turns out you're a cheating liar. If you can surprise me, I can surprise you just as well, can't I?" That shut her up. Before doing anything further, I decided to inquire more. How long has this been going on? I saw a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Today was the first time. Wrong answer. I shot a few inches below my first shot, causing debris to fall on her once again. She screamed and cried out. I told you I had enough time, which means I've heard things that made me suspect today wasn't the first time. I pointed the gun at my whimpering wife. Give me the correct answer now. It's been a month, she stammered. And who is he? She hesitated for a moment before answering. He's a bouncer at a club that my friends and I visit. I was right. Her friends were a group of 4 girls, including her. Do they know about this? They don't. Taking a chance. I shot once again, this time just beside my second shot. More debris flew. More screams. More crying. More whimpering. I waited. They do by now. My wife looked disheveled. The well-endowed guy had sat up. Listen, man, that's all he managed to say before my 4th bullet landed just above his head, showering him with debris. They both screamed this time, and my wife was shaking uncontrollably, trying her best to maintain composure. You speak when I tell you to. If not, a bullet will find its way into your body. I pointed the gun at his lower region, and he instinctively covered it with his hands. I silently thanked my father for building this house at least a kilometer away from others. There was nobody coming in response to my gunshots. Are you married? I asked him. No, I'm not, he croaked. So you have no wife or kids to support. Your death wouldn't matter to anyone, I questioned, pointing the gun at him. I take care of my parents, he hastily volunteered. That's unfortunate. You should have thought about them before. It might be too late now. Please, I'm sorry, he pleaded. Sorry for what? Sleeping with my wife? Getting caught in the act? Trying to harm me? Failing to do so, I let my anger show. He remained silent, only shaking his head. My wife saw something in my face that shocked her. I knew what it was, and I knew things were about to get worse. You see, I had always been a yes, dear guy, someone who was easily walked over, but there was a reason for that. Bang. My 5th bullet landed just next to the 4th, triggering another round of screaming. When I ask you a question, you answer. Okay, I said, pointing the gun at the well-endowed guy. He nodded, tears streaming down his dirt-covered cheeks. I'm sorry I got involved with your wife. I promise I won't ever see her again. I can't take that risk. You're a wounded animal. You might decide to harm me later, and I might end up dead in some alley. No, please. I swear, looking at my wife, who had stayed silent until now, he said, no woman is worth my life. Man, do you want me to trust the word of a womanizer? Someone who pursues and sleeps with married women. He looked up at me. She pursued me, not the other way around. I only agreed after she assured me we wouldn't get caught. I smiled for the first time. He had answered one of my unspoken questions. I pointed my gun at my wife. Why I? I don't know why. Bang. My 6th bullet landed above her head. More screams, more whimpers, but the duration was shorter than before. The girls. They kept teasing me for settling down too soon. They said I should have experienced more of life. She began whimpering again. That much was true. My wife and I had married out of college. We were each other's first. Her friends, however, never missed a chance to tease her about it. They would always make fun of her, bragging about their ever-changing boyfriends. When they teased me, I simply shrugged it off and said that I had everything I wanted and needed. My tone made it clear that their teasing didn't bother me. They never bothered teasing me again, but I could tell that it had taken a toll on my wife. She seemed to be holding something back. I decided to talk to her about it later. Then a thought hit me. What were you going to do if the baby didn't look like me? She went silent, shock written all over her face. I didn't see protection. I turned to the other person. Did you wear protection? No, I couldn't find any that fit properly, he admitted. I turned back to my wife, waiting for an answer. After a moment of hesitation, she finally spoke. I had started taking pills before we started. Where are the pills? I asked. She looked uneasy as she replied, they're in my bag. Show me. As she reached for her bag, she clutched the sheet to her chest. Drop the sheet, I commanded, my voice cold. Please, she pleaded. The 2 men in this room have seen your body, one without permission. Who are you trying to protect your dignity from? She flinched and reluctantly dropped the sheet. While her body may have been beautiful, it no longer held any allure for me. Her fair skin was now marked with bruises, especially around her front and back. "How did you plan on explaining these bruises to me?" I asked, pointing at the battered skin. Then it hit me over the past month or so. She had been refusing to be intimate with me, coming up with various excuses. I trusted her and wasn't pushy, but now I regretted both. She looked ashamed, having realized what I must have thought. She took out the tablet strip from her bag and showed it to me. There were enough empty pockets to convince me that she wasn't trying to conceive. "How were you going to explain the possibility of an STD?" I asked next. Her head snapped up so fast I thought it might break. I pointed at the other person. "He's not your faithful husband. Do you really think you would keep it with him when other people came calling?" The fear on his face confirmed her worst fears. "For all you know, you could have contracted AIDS from him and passed it on to me," I shouted. "And what would you have done?" "Blame me." The other person tried to speak up. "Look, man, I've never felt sick or anything." I turned to him. "What is your education?" I sneered. He seemed taken aback. "I only finished high school." Exactly as I thought, I belittled him, a plan forming in my head. "I bet you don't even know what AIDS stands for." I continued angrily. AIDS affects different people in different ways. Some may have it without even realizing it for years, while for others it may manifest within months. Of course, I can't hold it all against you. "You are a disease yourself." My wife put her head down and openly sobbed. The other person looked furious, as if he wanted to hit me. "So, you risked our lives for a taste of this disease?" I spat at my wife. "I hope you enjoyed it, because you might be bedridden by this time next year. I hope the memories of your affairs bring you comfort as you wait to die." "Please stop," she wailed. "You should have been the one to stop, especially now that we may both be infected." "Do you want me to stop talking about it?" I spat. Silence fell in the room for a moment before I said, "You're right. Neither of you are worth my bullets. Just let yourselves die." Saying this, I removed the cartridge from the gun, glancing at the other person out of the corner of my eye. As I expected, he lunged at me, but I quickly ducked and rolled, grabbing his legs and taking him by surprise. He tumbled down and landed face first. In a swift and practiced motion, I got onto one knee and twisted his leg until I heard a sickening crack in his knee. With my other hand, I retrieved the brass knuckles I had hidden in my pocket. He howled in pain, but before he could roll over, I lunged forward and slammed his head onto the floor. He slowed down, crying out in pain. I proceeded to break his fingers and knuckles, one hand at a time. Satisfied with the amount of pain and suffering he was experiencing, I stood up. My wife had frozen in place. She had never seen me so much as raise my voice since she had known me, let alone resort to violence. The truth is, I had a difficult childhood. My mom left my dad and me in the middle of the night for her lover. We never heard from her again, but the bullies at school made it their mission to remind me of it every chance they got, both physically and verbally. Since we lived in a small town, the gossip spread like wildfire and fueled the bullies even more. When I couldn't take it anymore, I fought back but failed. I failed many times, but each failure taught me valuable lessons. The physical pain was far easier to bear than the mental torment. Eventually, the pain became a motivator, and I became better at defending myself. The bullies started to end up in the hospital. One day, one of the bullies' fathers had to be hospitalized after he confronted me on my way home. I kept up a steady stream of verbal assault until he hit me in front of everyone. I retaliated, and since I had been hit multiple times before I hit back, it was considered self-defense. My dad realized that something needed to change, so he put me in therapy, which helped tremendously. The psychiatrist I saw was excellent. The incident with the bully's father also sent a clear message: the bullies left me alone, and they avoided me like the plague. I became a non-violent person, but not naive. I continued to practice my self-defense in private, knowing that it's always better to be cautious when you've angered more than one bully. I was glad I made that decision now. I met my wife during my first year of college, and we got married a few months later. There was no reason for her to suspect the violence within me. My wife had a tendency to always get what she wanted. While she started out as a sweet girl, she became increasingly frustrated and angry if she ever faced even a hint of refusal. I never denied her anything, which ultimately made me a doormat in her eyes. Back to the present. I rolled the other person over and looked up at my wife. "You might want to turn away. This is about to get ugly, and if you try to run, You might end up like him, still frozen. She watched as I got to work. I twisted his good leg until I heard another snap. His screams should have been heard for miles. Then I knelt down and began punching his legs, working my way up. I avoided his private areas and face, aiming to inflict pain rather than cause any permanent damage. Whenever he passed out from the pain, I would revive him with a few slaps. It took me 15 minutes to finish what I started. Slipping the brass knuckles back into my pocket, I took a moment to admire my handiwork. I was proud of the fact that there wasn't much blood. However, he had more broken bones than I could count, and his muscles were swollen and distorted. To give him a little extra, I focused on his biceps. He was unconscious but still breathing. My wife had remained motionless throughout the whole ordeal. Her face expressed the most fear I had ever seen from her. Deciding to have some fun, I suddenly shouted at the top of my lungs, which snapped her out of her trance. The next part of my plan was the most sadistic. "Now I want you to come here and lie beside him," I said. When her eyes widened, I added, "I promise not to touch you if you do as I say." She moved like a robot and lay beside him. I took her phone and handed it to her. "Take a selfie," what she exclaimed. "Take a selfie? What kind of sick person are you?" she wailed. "The kind that keeps his promises," I said coldly. "Now, take the selfie." With trembling hands, she took the picture. I made her take it again and again until we had a clear shot. "You can get up, but don't clean up," I instructed. She stood up and went to sit on the bed. "What are you going to do?" "He might die." "No," I replied. "He will live. You see, he's in so much pain that his body has shut down. In other words, he fainted." I dialed a number on my phone. "I have an emergency at home. I need you to come and bring an ambulance with you. Oh, and bring a female police officer." My wife was assaulted. When I turned to look at my wife, she was trembling with a mixture of fear and disgust. "You could have killed me. Please kill me." Anything but this. I sat beside her and tried to put my arm around her shoulder, but she moved away. I forced my arm around her anyway, and she looked away. "Look at me." Her whole body shook before she reluctantly faced me. "How else would you have wanted me to handle this? She shook her head in frustration. "Exactly. He needs medical attention if he has any chance of fully recovering. If I take him to the hospital and tell them the truth, I won't go to jail because it was self-defense. But you would be labeled as the town's disgust." She flinched, and I smiled. "If we say you were assaulted and I defended your honor, everyone will feel sorry for you, but they won't think of you as a disgust. Or, better yet, if we kill him, there won't be any need for the hospital. The court will treat the case with privacy. What do you say? Shall we kill him?" I asked, pulling out the gun from my pocket. She stared at me in horror. "Are you serious? What? Don't tell me you love him." "No, but you can't kill him. That's inhumane." "I made a promise, and I intend to keep it." "What promise are you talking about?" "My promise to protect your honor, the promise I made in our marriage." "Just because you broke your promise of remaining faithful, does that mean I should break mine?" "No. I would kill to save your honor." I pointed the gun at the motionless body of the other person. It took a full minute for her to respond. "You could say I was assaulted. TSK. Look at him. He can't be much older than us. He's single and has parents to care for him. He might not be able to walk again, or worse, he might not be able to use his hands if his nerves are damaged. All because you wanted a taste of something different." I sighed. "How could you be like this?" she asked through clenched teeth. I then proceeded to tell her the story of my childhood and the bullies I faced. "So, you see, my life has come full circle. I suffered because of my mother's infidelity. Or would you have preferred for me to be the sweet, obedient husband you thought you knew, only to be beaten by him? Because make no mistake, he was lunging for me." She fell silent. "I want an answer." A straightforward one. She trembled. "No, I was going to try to stop him when you shot. So, no, I wouldn't have wanted you to be hurt." She was telling the truth. I had been observing her out of the corner of my eye, and she did make an attempt to intervene. Just then, we heard the sirens. I walked over to the closet, got a bathrobe, and gave it to her, which she wore immediately. The first person to rush in was Inspector Ravi, my oldest friend. Taking a quick assessment of the situation, he asked me, "Is he going to live?" He should turning back. He called for help and 2 paramedics came in along with a female officer. He pointed at the motionless body of the python. The paramedics performed some basic tests and announced that he should be taken to the hospital immediately, which they did. Once they left, Inspector Ravi looked around and his eyes locked onto the bullet holes. Are those bullet holes? What happened? I'd come home to get some documents. There was a strange bike in the front. When I got in, I heard her screams. Not knowing how many were there, I took my gun and charged in to find him finished with her. I tried to shoot him in rage, but the guy kept ducking. He charged at me and I attacked. The rest is a blur. I mean, I remember hitting him, hitting hard. I just wish I had come sooner. I shook my head as if I was weary. When was your last counseling session? Yes, being my oldest friend, he knew all about me. But my wife seemed surprised that he knew. You know, it was during the last year of high school. I had to ask. You've done a number on him. Turning to face my wife, he said. I can't say how bad I feel for you. I know how traumatic it must be, but we have a few questions to ask. My wife nodded without facing him. When did he get in? What happened? He got in sometime late morning. He threatened me. He forced me. She wasn't acting, just looking at my slightly manic expression. If you are not comfortable telling, you can have a private conversation with Officer Rita here. I slightly shook my head, unnoticed except by my wife. She repeated the same. Okay, are you going to press charges? That depends on my wife, I said, looking at her expectantly. She struggled for words. I put an arm around her, making her flinch. I know her better than anyone. She'd want to put all of this behind her and move on. Isn't that so, dear? She nodded, looking at the other side. For the first time, Rita spoke. Listen, if you let him go unpunished, he and others like him will only be braver to do such things in the future. I don't think he will even be able to harm anyone for some time to come, officer, much less force a woman. As Ravi here said, I did a number on him, I said casually. Who was he? Did you know him? Ravi asked. He is a bouncer in one of the clubs that my wife and her friends visited, I replied. He must have followed and known this was the easiest place to attack. I'm sure you'd need medical attention, Rita offered soothingly. That she does, I agreed. Is there any way this guy can press charges against me? No way. First, this is your home, and he has attacked and assaulted your wife. This is self-defense. He paused for a minute before asking her, did he hurt you? My wife nodded, looking away. Then the guy is as good as dead. We'll have the evidence collected and processed. If in the unlikely possibility he does something stupid like what you said, it will seal the deal. We left for the hospital. On the way, I informed my office that I had a personal emergency and would not be available for some days. The ride was entirely silent. The process in the hospital took 2 hours. The process of testing for infections was automatic. It gave me relief. The ride back was silent as well. When we reached home, my wife went into the bathroom and did not come out for an hour. When she did, she dressed comfortably and started out the door when I stopped her. Where are you going? I want time alone. I am going to the guest bedroom. I suggest you don't call any of your friends at this time. If you do and tell them the truth, there might be confusion since the police are involved now. I just need time by myself. Okay. She left with that. I was thankful for the solitude as I had my own thinking to do. Though I was portrayed to be a guy in control of what was happening, I was barely that. My childhood violence, my ability to hurt others had made me delusional. I understood this only when I went into counseling. The psychiatrist, bless him, made me understand all it took was one slip in a violent situation to go wrong for me to fall. I understood the reality. More than that, he made me understand that violence should always be the last choice and should be used sparingly when in utmost need. For example, if you rescue a girl about to be harmed, you may be forced to use violence, but it should be used only until the attacker is disabled, not dead. He made me understand that violence can be a dangerous addiction that could consume me and put others around me in danger. Once I got this through my thick head, I avoided being violent. Then there was today. I could have left the guy alone after I had broken his leg. He had lost the fight. But no, I had made an example out of him. All for what? This was not a school where when I made an example out of one bully, the others kept their distance in fear. One could argue that my wife needed to learn a lesson. Maybe she had. That being said, My actions this afternoon rattled me. I had made myself known as a warm person in my circle. Did I want to become addicted to violence? No, thank you. I had to start again. Maybe I should visit my counselor once again. These were my thoughts when it was close to 6 p.m. and she came back to our bedroom. By this time, I had cleaned up the place as much as I could, but the bullet holes would require some patchwork. She stood at the entrance without coming in. You can come in, you know I am not going to bite you. I don't know what you are capable of anymore. I looked up from my laptop. I can say the same thing. She looked away hurt. That gave me satisfaction. A thought came to me and I laughed. That got her attention. Usually the aggrieved party tells the cheater you brought this upon yourself. Here, though, it's literally true. Think about it. My violent past was just that past. To be frank, I knew I was being too compliant with you. If you did not have an affair, this whole thing would not have happened. She hugged herself as I spoke and responded to my surprise. You are right. I brought this upon myself. Is there a chance for us? I had to laugh at that, unsettling her. After all you've seen me do, you still want us, she sighed. Yes, as you said, I had no inkling what you were capable of, and it would have stayed that way if not for me. My answer is no, I said bluntly, making her pause. I don't have any interest in staying married to a selfish, cunning, contemptuous, and ignorant person. Her eyes widened in response to my words. How could you say that? I am not saying what I did was right, but that I don't deserve. She tried to muster up all the dignity she could. It was pathetically funny. I laughed mirthlessly. When you decided to have an affair, what is that if not selfishness? When you went on the pill and did not have a physical relationship with me on those days to avoid letting me into your life, what is that if not cunningness? From the time I came in till now, you have been worried only about yourself, and you've done that unconsciously. You've not given a conscious thought to anything else. What is that if not selfishness, contempt, and ignorance? Fresh tears started falling as I spoke, but she controlled herself from sobbing. Okay, I deserve all that. I slipped. I've been terrible. Call me worse. I will change. Stop it right there. You're still in damage control mode. You need to leave. No. We have to talk anyways. Why not now? I admitted to my mistake. You are only parroting what I say. You haven't had an original thought. You know why? It's because you are afraid to be truthful. You do not want to save this marriage. You only want to save yourself. She was silent for some time, her eyes wavering for answers. Okay, I am officially adding naivety to the list of your attributes. She gave me a scathing look but kept silent. I knew this was going to go nowhere. Years of having her way with no repercussions had deprived her of the ability to introspect. I decided to finish it. Okay, I am going to ask some questions and you are going to give me honest answers. If you lie, end of conversation. She nodded apprehensively. Imagine our positions reversed. You come home to find me spending time with someone attractive. I ask you why you are home when you confront us. Now tell me how you'd feel. She visibly swallowed. I be honest, I gritted my teeth. I would think you had no respect for me. Next, I ask you when you came in, what did you feel then? Her breathing increased. I would think you hold me in contempt. Very good, you're making progress. Finally, I tell you this is not what it looks like. She shook her head as if to make my words go away. God, I don't know what to say. Okay, fair enough for a naive person. Let me ask you this, all these questions aside. What's the minimum thing you'd expect from me? Her hand went to her mouth. She sobbed for a minute before saying, I'm sorry. She continued to sob for another couple of minutes. I felt no triumph. She slowly walked and sat at my feet. Catching hold of them, she said, I am so sorry. I made a terrible mistake. Please forgive me. I let my friend's words get to my head. I will make it up to you. Please, it won't work even then. Even if you keep up all you said, I said without pausing to think. She frowned. Why not? I scoffed. Where did your brains go? Hush, she jumped. I continued. Did you enjoy spending time with him? The fear came back in her face. She kept silent. Answer me. And be honest about it, I growled. Was he better than me? Did you have a good time with him? Her fingers around my feet shook. So he was better than me. It'd only be a matter of time before you'd want that. Since I am not like him, I cannot provide you with what you got from him. In all the years of our marriage, you never did those things with me. You did them with him because you got something that you couldn't get from me. Now tell me, how are we supposed to handle this? And imagine how inadequate that makes me feel if I am going to stay married to you. She bent forwards, placing her face on my feet, crying. I was getting tired of this. Crying is not going to save your marriage. You either talk or leave. Don't waste my time. She did not respond, only continued to cry. I am not being mean. I am only stating facts. Either talk or leave. This crying is only confirming your selfishness. If you are really sorry, use your brain. She sat up and wiped away her tears. I am sorry. I just felt like I had no hope. I did not know what to do. I felt trapped. Welcome to my world. Those and more are what I felt when I found you hanging out with him this afternoon. That shut her up. I have not heard an us here, and you say you want to save this marriage, which involves two people, which should be us. Where's the US? What if we went to counseling? She asked hopefully. Counseling is not going to change who I am, neither is it going to help me grow taller. Both of which are the things that make me different. When I started spending time with him, I did not want someone different. I just wanted someone new. I wanted to see if there was a difference, like my friends said. Are you saying that someone different was not better than me? I do not love him. I love you, I sighed. Do you know what love is? It's thinking of your loved ones before you think about yourself. Now, where is your love for me in this friendship? And how is your love going to make things better? She looked in all possible directions before looking at me. I felt like I was inadequate for me. You. As she paused, I did not utter one word because this was the first original word coming from her since this noon. She continued. Every time I talked to my friends, the conversation would always steer towards relationships. How they did something new with their then current boyfriends. The accumulation of this over time made me feel like I had no experience. I felt that by the time they were married, they'd have so much experience that their married life would be exciting. It didn't help that though our relationship is good, we did not try new things. Yes, I could have talked to you, should have talked to you, but you always treat me with such care that I felt we would never be able to try new things. Learning from experience, not thinking about giving or taking, but doing what comes to mind. I knew you'd never do that, so the friendship. I sat there stunned. Women have the ability to mix up two unrelated things and make it look like they always belong together, but this was another level. I had to ask, you actually believe what you said? Her face expression told me she did. Absolutely. Let me get this straight. You're saying this friendship was a way to improve our relationship? She simply nodded, maybe with a glimmer of hope that I'd understand her reasoning. Her logic was not great, yet I wanted to understand it. I was disappointed in what I did earlier. How long were you planning to have this so-called friendship? She looked down and rubbed her hands together before answering. I hadn't figured that out. I rubbed my temples. If this friendship was about you improving our relationship, how come things became worse in the last month? She faltered. I didn't expect Robbie to be so different. Every time I was with him, I was afraid you'd find out since I felt like I had changed. That's why I avoided being close with you once I'd been with him. She was getting smarter, at least in her explanations. She avoided using the word relationship with him. Like that could cover up the disaster. I shook my head in weariness caused by her confusing logic. I can't tell if you are just clueless or crazy or both. She seemed to be taken aback, but wisely kept silent. Let's say your learning experience went on for 6 months to 1 year or more. How did you think I was going to handle it if you refused to spend time with me for extended periods of time? Her breathing increased, showing desperation. But you have never pressured me for closeness before. Remember the time I was going through something, and you were so understanding I blew out my breath in exasperation. You were going to take advantage of my understanding nature. She quickly looked away and stayed silent. You do know that your body would have been negatively affected after being exposed to something harmful, right? How were you going to explain that I don't, not. She trailed off, looking away. You were enjoying it too much to think about the consequences. I sighed. Your attempt at making things right is only making things worse. I can see that. She muttered. Going back to my original point, I am sure you'll not be satisfied with me anymore. Why do you keep saying that? When was the last time you used public transportation? When was the last time you bought something that was not expensive? The thing is my wife came from a middle-class family. No car of her own, always having to use public transportation. Every purchase made was carefully considered. That was all before our marriage. Once married, she quickly adapted to a luxurious lifestyle and never looked back. Your qualities are not subpar, she declared with sudden conviction. Yes, I did enjoy my time with him, but he and I had nothing in common. There was no love lost. He was a bit too selfish like you. I shot back, cutting her off. What, like how you interrogated me when I caught you spending time with him this afternoon? I was desperate. I still am, she admitted, running her finger through her hair. What I am trying to say here is, I am not focused on material things. Though I did enjoy his company, I don't need that to be happy. My happiness is based on love, which only you can provide. I had to chuckle. She made it sound believable. So you want my love, not my money? She looked hurt instantly. How could you even doubt that? That made me laugh, causing her hurt to increase. I have every right to question anything about you, your thoughts, your actions, your inactions. You planned birth control without telling me and put us at risk. This shows that you are deceitful and foolish at the same time. Even if you manage to convince me to stay married to you, it will be years before I can trust anything you say. Maybe never. Can you live with that? I will earn your trust back, she declared with determination. How do you plan to do that? I asked, wanting to know what kind of plan she had. Simply by being open to any doubts you may have. Every moment of my life will be transparent from now on, she said with stronger determination. I shook my head in weariness. A marriage is not a place where you constantly question everything in the name of trust. A marriage should be based on love and trust that is freely given. If I am going to doubt everything you do, I will be miserable. Imagine I am in an important meeting and I start doubting what you are doing right at that moment. I can't handle that stress, and in your case it might be years before I stop thinking that way, by which time I will be a wreck. Is that what you want? Just as I thought I had caught her off guard, she gave me a counter-proposal I didn't expect. What if I brought my mother to live with me? I will no longer go out with my friends, and if I do go out, it will be with either you or her. That way you can rest easy knowing I have someone to watch over me, someone to account for my time without you needing to check up on me every hour. This was the side of her that had always won arguments. Its appearance angered me. Her mother was a widow who lived with her son and his wife and their kids. A kind lady, I had stayed with her many times, but never for an extended period of time. I need a wife, not someone on probation, I said coldly, eliciting a hurt look, which satisfied me. Look, I have not been happy for some time now because of your entitled attitude. I convinced myself I was at fault until today. I no longer need someone who cheats on me and treats me poorly. I will no longer cheat, and I will not take anything for granted. I will be the wife I should have been, the wife you deserve. I will make it up to you, she vowed with all the earnestness she could muster. There it is again, making it up to me. And how do you plan on making it up to me? I just told you. I will be the wife, she started again, only to be stopped by me. Those actions are correcting your own mistakes. It's about you becoming a better person. While it will be better for me if you do, how will it give me back all the time I lost because of your selfishness? She stared at me, like she was wondering why I was rejecting her attempts. Still, she persisted, I know I can't. But I will be the best version of myself that you will forget a worst version of me ever existed. Easier said than done. Just now, how many times did I have to point out the flaws in your thinking? I no longer have the patience for that. Hell, why should I have threw at her? Because you still care about me. If not for that, you wouldn't have helped me see my mistakes. If you had disliked me, I would have ended up in the hospital like Robbie, or even worse, I could be dead, she said calmly. I scoffed. Maybe there is still some love for you in my heart, but we're only having this conversation because I'm curious. I may be a terrible person, but I only attacked Robbie because he attacked me first. If he hadn't, he wouldn't have a scratch on him. She scoffed back. He attacked you because you wanted him to. You planned for it to happen. What sane person would provoke and taunt someone much stronger, all while holding them at gunpoint, only to lower the gun when they've had enough? She shook her head and weakly smiled at me. Robbie fell into your trap, and so did I. From now on, he will always be my assailant, and I will be a victim. So, she saw right through my plan? Good for her. That lets me know not to mess with her. I shrugged. You still haven't convinced me how you'll make it right. What can you offer me that I don't have? She looked straight into my eyes. What? You want retribution? Maybe go out with some of my friends. I want to ruin them even more for destroying my marriage, I said casually, with a slightly mischievous grin. Her reaction was immediate. She was terrified. Please don't do anything impulsive. Leave them out of this, please, I sadly nodded. If only you had cared about my well-being as much as you do for your friends. Her lips trembled. I do, I care a lot about you, prove it. Now, I said, growing impatient with her. Don't ask me how. I didn't tell you how to have an affair, yet you managed to have one. If you truly care about me, you should be able to figure out a way without my guidance. If you can't do that, then leave. Within a second, she sprang up and left the room. I was sad to see her go, but deep down, I knew it had to happen. A minute later, she returned, surprising me. She was holding a pair of long scissors. She emptied her purse on the bed, then proceeded to cut up her credit cards and debit cards one by one. Those cards were her pride and joy. I can still remember the day she showed them off to her friends, making them jealous for once. Once she finished, she picked up her phone and made a call. Hello. Hi, Mom, how are you? I'm good, Mom. I need a favor. I want you to come live with us for a while. Everyone has problems, but nothing is unsolvable if you make an effort. I don't want to burden you with the details. I'll figure it out myself. But I need you here with me if I'm going to solve it. I don't know for how long, Mom. I'll talk to my brother and let him know I want you here. I'll also let you know when to come later. What? No, I'm not pregnant. Listen, you need to trust me on this. Thanks, Mom. I know I can count on you. Bye. Love you too. Once the call ended, she made another call. Hey, hi, Ria. I just wanted to let you know that I don't want to see or hear from our gang anymore. You can tell the others. No, this isn't a joke. I'm dead serious. Today marks the end of my madness. Life happened. Okay, I want to get my act together, and I want to do it by myself. No, he didn't force me to do this. It's all my decision. Yes, I know what I'm doing. Now, goodbye. She hung up. She and her gang had been together since kindergarten, so it must have been tough for her to make that decision. I reluctantly accepted that she was committed. She looked at me. I no longer have any money except for the cash you may give me. I'm done with acting entitled. My mom will be here once I let her know. I have no more friends, no one to show off to accept you. Do you trust me now, knowing that you're the only one I care about? I shook my head and chuckled. This could all just be a temporary arrangement, for all I know. Her anger flashed for a moment, but before she could say anything, I continued. However, I'm willing to give you a chance. Her shoulders relaxed. That's all I ask for. Epilogue. Her friends came to our home that night, but she didn't let them in. That night, she woke up screaming from a nightmare. I knew it would happen. She was reliving the moment when I fought off the menacing snake. I had to hastily go from my bedroom to the guest room where she was sleeping, and I held her tightly to calm her down. It would take some time for her to stop having these nightmares. She never mentioned them once she was awake and clear-headed. The next day, her mom moved in with us. To her credit, she never asked me what happened, and she continued to be the same sweet lady as always. When her friends approached me the following day, I told them that I didn't force her into anything. It took some time, but they left me alone when I kept repeating the same thing. The STD test results came back negative, bringing relief to both of us. The police handled the case with utmost discretion, and it never made it to the newspapers. We attended counseling together. It was the same counselor who helped me with my anger issues. I didn't trust anyone else. I anticipated it would be challenging, but it was even tougher than expected. While her main concern was her insecurity about her attractiveness, we also needed to find a way for me to communicate without suspicion or judgment. Despite her efforts to be transparent, going above and beyond what I expected, I still struggled to trust her. But she never complained and always had an understanding smile. It was helpful to have her mother by our side. My wife was right when she said it would make me feel more at ease. I had to control my temper and follow the counselor's advice of taking deep breaths when I felt angry with her. When her mother wanted to visit her grandson, my wife accompanied her to her brother's house. They made sure to return by nighttime, usually staying for just a day. It took about 3 months for us to sleep in the same bed again, and 6 months for us to be intimate. When that happened, I became furious and treated her roughly, even crossing into abusive territory. She cried herself to sleep, and I didn't apologize or comfort her. The next morning, I saw her and the bruises were even worse than before. If her mother noticed her discomfort, she never mentioned it, at least not to me. That night, my wife surprised me by initiating intimacy and showing love and affection. "Aren't you concerned about a repeat of last night?" I asked, surprised by her actions. She smiled sweetly. "If it helps you release your anger, I welcome it for the rest of my life," she continued with lovemaking like we had never experienced before. I never became angry during intimacy again. That night also restored my trust in her. It was then that I asked her to delete the painful reminder of what had brought us to that point. She almost became a recluse overnight. It took almost a year, until her birthday, for me to realize that she hadn't bought any new clothes or accessories. Her spending decreased significantly, only buying what was necessary. During counseling, the therapist explained that her decision to cut up her credit cards and distance herself from certain friendships had a therapeutic effect. It allowed her to eliminate distractions from her life. Bringing her mother to live with us also helped her focus on the present. It took us a few years, but we made it through, and I must admit that it was mainly because my wife was determined. It seemed like she never thought of herself after that fateful day. As for him, the guy who caused all the trouble, he had to stay in the hospital for 4 months before he was able to walk and function independently. Even then, it was a struggle for him. He encountered difficulties in finding a job due to his injuries and the resulting limitations. The last I heard, he was working as a dishwasher. I was at my office, working on a proposal when I received the message that changed my life forever. It read, "I'm going to be a mother."